Good morning, everybody. I'm very honored to be invited by the MCU to be the visiting professor of the IBSC class here. The subject I suppose to talk about is the concept and principle of Mahayana Buddhism. Probably here we have some Mahayana available here. Concept and principle we will talk later. First, I would like to talk about what is the first sermon of the Buddha after his get enlightenment under Bodhi tree. In Theravada tradition, of course, we know the first turning wheel at the deer park. When the Buddha come to that park to talk with those 5 fellow ascetics that practicing meditation with him. And in that, of course, in that sermon, the first sermon, in Pali Canon, we know that that is the first theory, the first concept and principle of Buddhism. Actually, not Theravada or Mahayana, but this is Buddhism. That means the principle of middle way. But then we will later on. That means we have had time. We will talk about what the middle way mean in Mahayana Buddhism. How they define middle way. In that first sermon, the Buddha talk about that means you don't mortify yourself, but you should not indulge too much. You keep a middle way of life. That how to live. This is very important. And later on, Mahayana Buddhism will develop from this idea of middle way. Of course, in Pali Canon, in another sutta, Buddha also talk about the middle way in another way. Not just like in the first sermon. Talk about that some people will say everything exists, and some say that no, after we die, nothing exists. Gone. So this is the being and non-being. The middle way even in Pali Canon. Yeah, you could now you could search for yourself on website and which sutra in that theory in there. That means being and non-being. When Buddhism and the Buddha teaching is not, we are not a firm being nor not a firm non-being. We are in middle way in that sutra. So the first sermon that one, but now to talk back to the first sermon, that the middle way in the way of life. But then now, what is the first sermon to the Mahayana? What is the first sermon of the Buddha? Of course, the Chinese Pitaka. That means they have the Agama. In Agama, that means corresponding with the Nikaya. In the Pali Canon, in Sanskrit the tradition, they also have that this turning of the wheel, that sutra. But then the famous sutra in Mahayana, and that is they consider the first sermon of the Buddha. That is the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Garland Sutra. In Chinese, Hoa Yen, in Vietnamese, Hoa Nghiêm, Kinh Hoa Nghiêm. So we have only that sutra also. We have Vietnamese now. The Vietnamese student here could read it. Probably later on, I will ask the honor Venbon, the disciple of the Venbon Thitin. He's former chairman of our Executive Council of Vietnam Buddhist Sangha. He's translated and will present to IBSC that Vietnamese version of the Avatamsaka, so that for the Vietnamese student here to read directly themselves much faster. Yeah. Interestingly enough, the who's main character of this first sermon? Of course, you have the Buddha after enlightenment. Where the venue of that sermon? Not Deer Park, but at the Bodh Gaya itself. And then, who is the listener? The disciple. We have Balika and Tapusa and Balika. These two businessmen. These two men in Pali Canon also have it. That's the name. But it disappear and then it disappear. That means these two men. That means the first they seem. That mean in Pali Canon also that they have that information. That the first person that the Buddha met after his enlightenment is these two businessmen. And usually in Mahayana we put it that the first two disciples of Buddha himself, he received that these two men that received two things. We have the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. But that these two men they get only two jewels. That after they listen to the Buddha sermon and they become the Buddha disciple, and they get only two jewels. That means the Buddha and Dharma, not Sangha yet, because the only Buddha and these two persons. So and that is one of the difference, between the two traditions. The first sermon. And now we will talk about what the content of this sermon. This is a big sutra, in Chinese translation, they have three times of translating it. The first one, that a short version in 40 volumes. And then later on, they brought in, because at that time, because the distance between India and China is quite long, so later on they brought in a longer version, 60 volumes, translated into Chinese. And the final version is 80 volume, quite big one, 100 pages. And what is the main teaching of the Buddha in this sutra, in his first sermon? He talked about the interdependent origination, that everything is connecting with each other. That is what in Pali Canon we know, the famous one in Pali Canon. Of course, we have this theory of interdependent origination. That is, if this exists, then the other exists. You know? I mean, everything is connected. We Buddhism, we don't have a theory of creating God, you know. We have the idea that everything existing, and they existed in connection with each other. Yeah. They cannot exist itself. And in this sutra, the main content, the main theory is this theory of interdependent origination, that is paticca samuppada. In Sanskrit, that is pratitya samutpada. And of course, everybody knows that usually in when Buddhism developed in the early period, this theory of interdependent origination becomes the main principle of Buddhism. And up to now, if somebody asks us how we conceive what is existing here, we say that all exists in connection with each other. They cannot exist alone. Put everything into a system. And of course we know that the paticca samuppada also, we have in Pali, we have the word paticca samuppada. But the thing is that this in Mahayana, they push it. That means the first sermon. In the first sermon, that means the truth that the Buddha discovered under Bodhi tree is this one. That they discover everything connecting with each other. No creating God. Everything is there. And of course, we Buddhists, and we try to live happily, you know. That what the Buddha bring to us is that bring to us how to live happy. Live happy. That's very simple. You know, the Buddha probably he live in the royal palace, but he still has something unsatisfied. Usually dukkha, that means unsatisfactoriness, you know. Usually we translate suffering, but actually people say that it's even in Chinese too. But it seems that translate that's not very clear. Actually, that unsatisfied, satisfactory. We feel it's not enough. We still wish something. So the Buddha brings us that make we feel happy, that make we feel satisfied. That means we have enough. And the person listened to Buddha at that time, these two businessmen. When we do the CPT text here, on Mahayana side, we introduce one fragment, quotation from that sutra, but then unavailable. Mahayana available. They have a Mahayana cloth, or that garment. Ask me, in that sutra, because he knows, of course, it's Mahayana, so he knows this sutra. And he said, that means that sutra Buddha talked, there are a lot of entourage. Thousands of them in that sutra. So he asked me, where did the Buddha get so many entourage? When the first under both Bodhi tree? It just get up there. Formerly, that means 2,000 years, 2,000 years ago, that area, that been forest, quite dense forest, thick forest. And where of course these two, Balika and Tabusa is alright. 2 person is alright. 2 names is alright. But then in that there are a lot of people there. Where did he get those people? But I think probably up to now, that we see that from Rashgiya, that means the Rashgiya, that means the capital of Magadha, and there are some from the Patna, Pataliputra come down there. Probably they have a road running through that area. I believe so. But the road still around. That means when now we go from Patna to Rashgiya on the same and very close there. I think. Just like that, like when I visited the Ajanta, it's now Ajanta is on and forest, but then formerly that must be there a road from Aurangabad to Mumbai, somewhere. That's why that the people say that at that time all those merchants, they offer dana to the monk there, to the community of monk there, and that the monk there they have time and they have food and they could have some money to ask the help from sculptor on the craftsman to carve out that Ajanta cave painting, Anyway, that now is in forest now, but then in the 19th century, that means the Englishman, that means some English officer on hunting trip, and they find out that Ajanta cave. Anyway, I think the Bodh Gaya that now, of course, now is on the road between Rashgiya and Bihar, something like that. But then at Buddha time, I think that probably that road already exists. So, but then we have these 2 merchants, 2 businessmen. Of course, at that time, if you do trade, you do business, you should have something to sell and to buy. So I think these 2 merchants, they have a lot of entourage with them. And that's why in the Vavadansika, the Buddha not only talked with these 2 merchants, but also that on these these 2 merchant entourage, that helper, also there. But of course they belong probably during that time. Probably these 2 is just like right now. That means big businessmen we come in and we couldn't contact on their helper, That's right. So the Buddha talked with these 2. But in the sutra itself, they depicted Buddha not only those who sees 2 merchants, but also a lot of people. One day what they call Bodhisattva. And I will talk about that the concept in Mahayana Buddhism. We have concept of Bodhisattva. Of course, in Bali we have Bodhisattva too. But then it just like it put in a very small place. But in Mahayana it pushed out and become a big subject, big way of how to conceive the Bodhisattva, Bodhisattva Magga, and then Yeah, I suppose to have 1 hour. You know, we have 1 hour of discussion. Yeah, so I see very much, and we have half an hour more. So, Bodhisattva, you know, it's in this sutra also that they talk about the entourage of the Buddha. There is a Bodhisattva. That means the idea, the concept, and later on the theory of Bodhisattva Magga, that Bodhisattva way, only start with this first sermon. Now, the second concept, principle of Mahayana Buddhism. That means you have interdependent origination, then Paticca Samuppada, and then you have a Bodhisattva around. Bodhisattva later on become Bodhisattva Magga. What the content of Bodhisattva we will talk later on in this afternoon. Yeah, but then, so if we have a good summary of this first sermon, they talk about the Buddha talk with normal people, merchant people. And these two is the first disciple of the Buddha. And then the doctrine, or the truth that Buddha experienced himself in his enlightenment is the theory of interdependent origination. Where that clearly say that everything exists is in interconnection with other thing. Nothing exists itself. No creating God. And this one will later on that means the interdependent origination, the theory later on will lead to a third concept, principal concept of Mahayana Buddhism is emptiness, Shunyata. In this sutra, that Buddha just slightly talk about it, not very deep in it. But in another section, in another sutra, a big one, Swansang, he translated into Chinese 600 volume. Very big sutra, talking about emptiness. That is the sutra of Prajna Paramita Sutra, 600 volume. That 100,000 sloka. Now a fragment of it, that means the 25,000 sloka still existing, and a few of it, and 8,000 sloka still that in Sanskrit still existing. And my friend Professor Lancaster, he put on website. You could check for yourself on the University of the West. When he was the president of that university, and he put it up. The Raymond Xing gave a fund to work on that and put up on University of the West. Yeah, look into the University of the West. Yeah, in Los Angeles. Yeah, America. That is 600 volumes. So it's if that means Swansang translation. That only sutra is like this one. So when we look at it, sometimes we get doubted. You know, that means too big sutra. And of course, they translate into Chinese step by step, 8,000 sloka, and then a few fragments of it. And then the first one is in the early 2nd century. Only they translated into Chinese. Yeah. So that means translate into Chinese in 8,000 sloka. The question of this sutra is a big problem, you know. And later on, I think if here any venerable have a liking for IT, for computer, I think it's the question of using computer. That means the IT technique to determine, because there are so many different sutras in there. And which one the earliest? Because it's 600 volumes like that. And how the Buddha could talk continuously so long. So in a speech also, in a discourse, so long like that. So we wonder ourselves, and how they put together. And the question now, for scholar now, myself, I only propose one way to use mathematical statistic, you know, Potsung on this method, you know, to calculate. That means we put on the Sanskrit into a memory in a dictionary, and then a memory, and then we somehow sort out somehow that which one is first, which one is second, something like that. The oldest one and the older and then the later coming, something like that. That in statistical in mathematics, they have a method of finding that, of how that means in if you know about Biblicon, the Bible, the Christianity, they have the Bible, New Testament. Of course, we don't talk about Old Testament in Hebrew. The New Testament is written in Greek, you know, not in Hebrew. I suppose Jesus Christ is some sort of belong to Hebrew people, you know, some Hebrew speaking people. But then now the 4 Bible. I don't know any venerable here read the New Testament yet. You should read. Yeah. Actually, to study English, to have good English, you will start with the Bible. I start learning English by studying Bible, because when I studied with a pastor, you know, when in 54, 55, when American come in South Vietnam, and at that time a young student, 11 years old, I come to Huế to have my high school, and then near to my high school, the famous high school of Huế, where Ho Chi Minh, all those leader of Vietnam, they studied that school. So next to it, not far away, some American pastor, I don't know which denomination he belonged to, but he ran a compound there. Then they organized the English teaching in the afternoon and evening, that about 4-5 p.m. And then I come and study. That means we saw that in English class. So I'm a young student. I came in, and of course the class, and they give us a bilingual Bible. I mean, there be English, and one side English, one side Vietnamese, and a 4 Bible there. And of course they start reading, for example, John, John Bible. We have Bible. We have New Testament. We have four versions. You know. You have Matthew. The first one is Matthew. You have Luke. You have Mark, and then John. And this pastor, he loved John Bible. So New Testament. So he start reading. So up to now, I still remember in the beginning, the Word was God on these things. You know, that's the first sentence of that Bible by John. And you should read, because if you have to good English, bad English, you should start with that. And when you do that by heart, of course you learn by heart. That means you know your English is very good one. You know, I believe so. That means and then they say so. They say that even that mean, you know, every American president inauguration speech, usually there's some quotation from Bible there. Is that right, Dr. Frank Hoffman? Yeah. It's a cultural item, even if you're not religious. That's right. That's right. But because that is the first is the official literary English, you know. King James Bible. I didn't read King James Bible. I read this Buster. Yeah. Yeah. So the Christian scholar, that means biblical scholar, because now they discover a different version of New Testament. On the skin, that means on the letter, that means on the clothes, on these things. So now, for example, they have a Jerusalem Bible, you know, all kind of thing. So they try to figure out which one, the first one. What we have now, officially, that means if now, when I start learning English, you know, the Professor Sigon at that time, he from Harvard, and he gave me, that means the Greek grammar book of course, and then that Bible, the New Testament, edited by Harvard. I mean, 4 Bible in Greek, you know. So, but then we have author discover manuscript of New Testament, and the Christian scholar, the biblical scholar, they try to figure out which one is the earliest. Of course, if you know about Christianity and you know Coptic, you know Egyptian, Ethiopian, and the Egyptian Christian, you know, that means they have Coptic Bible too. So big problem in Christianity. Yeah, just like the case, exactly just like our Prajna Paramita Sutra, 600 volumes. Now, usually now we in Vietnam or everywhere, even chanting at Vesak, chanting for peace. Usually we chant only about 200 words of the Prajna Paramita Sutra, that they call Heart Sutra, that the Man Sutra. But then which one is the oldest? Which one is the later coming? That big problem. So I hope that here, the sitting here, somebody will later on working on this one. Try to work on how to figure out which one among you have. That means the Heart Sutra, very short one, and you have about 20 or 200 sloka, and then you have 1,000 sloka version, and then you have 8,000 sloka version, and 25,000 sloka version, and 100,000 sloka version. And which one now we try to figure out, and using present day method, you know. Yeah. And for Buddhist studies, I think on Mahayana side anyway. Of course, the on Pali side, on the Theravada side, I think big problem too. If you here, do you have, you know, in Vinaya, we have the question of the A respect, that means the for the bhikkhuni, you know. In the bhikkhu, we have bhikkhu and bhikkhuni, Vinaya. And then in bhikkhuni, Vinaya, they have 8 commandments for respect. I went to, at one time I went to Taiwan, they invited me to their day for some nun, the college there. And those nuns, they think that this, just like Somo, Venerable Somo, Professor Somo at San Diego, yeah, that they think in Somo life, that means this A commandment of respect is a later addition based upon studying of the Pali there. I myself, I am not, I keep distant from that, but then at that, in that conference, no, I didn't see any monk that I know in Taiwan come to that conference in Taiwan. But anyway, that's the question. So even in Pali, big problem that in language, the question of language, even in Pali Canon, we have many sutras, 5 Nikaya. So which one? We are not talking about the Vinaya. We talk about only the sutra. And yesterday I talked with a number of Vietnamese students about that in Vinaya, the German scholar Luder, by name Luder, he only find that in those sutras there are some paragraph that is not Pali, and he published it by Academy of Science of the Berlin in Germany. So it's very interesting. That means for Pali studies, and so on the Sanskrit side, Mahayana side, the question of Mahaya Prajna Paramita Sutra. In this sutra, 600 volumes, Swansang translation, won't talk completely about what emptiness is in Buddhist view, in the Buddha world. That Buddha world, this is sutra, so the Buddha world. And of course, you know that in Pali, people would think that this is this concept is purely Mahayana Buddhism. Is not. Of course, in Bali Canon you have the Maha Sunyata Sutta and Chula Sunyata Sutta. You have 2 sutta about Sunyata, but very, very short one. Let's talk about very, very short, empty room, something like that. But then that shows that there is that shows that even in Pali tradition, in Theravada tradition, they only know that at some time Buddha gave a discourse on this subject, Sunyata. And I think they probably depending upon school. Just like now we have in Japan, for example, Vietnam is not, but that's it. But Japan, for example, the Nichiren, for example, the Hokkei school, for example, they only Namo Melfa Liên Hoa Ching. That means Renyokyo, something like that. That means that they respect to the Sattva Mundarika, the Lotus Sutra only. Yeah. So I think probably each school have adopted a theory of themselves, and probably they because it's too the Buddha lived for almost that means 45 years, something like that. That means for 45 years, that means he gave many discourses. So each remember to his liking. When the Buddha teach, Buddha taught, and his life, that one, so he keep remember. Then the other one, he feel very strange to him. Or somehow he couldn't understand, or somehow he say that, oh, something like that. So he couldn't remember it. So I think that's why they had that kind of different tradition. But the remnant is there. Even that in this Prajnaparamita Sutra, 600 volume, they only have the simile, the example that the Buddha talked about. That means his teaching is just like a raft for crossing the river. So after you crossing the river, then throw out the raft, not carry with on the other side, on the other bank of the river, then leave it the raft there for other people to cross back, something like that, and not we go on ourselves. Much better than carry with it on our shoulder. So that example, that means that we have in Pali and we have in Prajnaparamita Sutra, and the sutra famous in Vietnam, in China, in Japan. That is the that means Diamond Sutra, Vatra Chedika Prajnaparamita Sutra. So that means I trace back for you to see that God have in Mahayana already there. That we have remnant. It's not purely new. Even that is first sermon. You know, the first sermon completely new. But then the personality, the person who listened to Buddha, there is, you have in the Pali Canon. Very interesting. For me, I think it's very interesting. Exactly because now we have only those four holy languages. We have only Pali. In Pali, we have in Sanskrit, we have in Chinese, and we have in Tibetan. So we rely upon only these four languages to learn about what our Buddha give to us. So that is the difficulty, you know. So, but actually that means show that we have many things in common. That belong different. Of course, we are not talking about Chinese translation and Tibetan holy languages because they all are translated from Sanskrit. And only what is existing in Sanskrit, I am not talking about Chinese or Tibetan. So we, up to now, I am talking, we have at least three main concepts of Mahayana Buddhism. That means interdependent paticca samuppada. Yeah. Second thing is about middle way. The third one is emptiness. What the content of this concept is a big problem. You will see if we have time. And of course, I should talk about the last time. That means last year we have the help from the IBSC. We talk about the Madhyamika and Vijnanavada, and some lecture there. And I talk about how we know.
Hello.
One of the big problem is how we know.
Hello.
Buddhism responds to this question. I mean, just like later on, problem not only philosophy question but also science question. Now they got kind of neuroscience problem. That's how we see things. Because what we are talking now, we are talking without her, we dealing without her, we living without her together like this one. It's through our perception, through our knowledge. Then how we know? No. The Buddha, of course, Buddhism, and the Buddha himself, he also, not he's of course he's a philosopher too, he's a scientist too, he's an educator too. He had many roles to play, but then the question for us, and later on it's become a school, in Buddhism, in Mahayana Buddhism. That's how we know, and how we know it's true. It sometimes it's false. Knowledge is not always true, it's false. How we know true and false? I just talk about, and last time I want to mention that the question of middle part between being and non-being. Just like in Shakespeare, the question is now the question is being and non-being in Shakespeare, How we know? We exist. This is a subject that now the scientists, present-day scientists, are very interested in Buddhism on this question through mindfulness or meditation, and this is start with the Buddha sitting under Bodhi tree. He get all those things, that those three main concepts from his sitting under Bodhi tree, thinking about it. Not what usually here in MC we talk about mindfulness. Yeah, we have why? How for the mind? What is mind? In English, very problem is it? You have a journal formerly in England. They publish a Mind magazine, but in its own thing. There are a lot of philosophers they publish their article there, And what is mind? Only we talk here. It's through our, The question now is how we get this thing, and how we know it's true. What I am talking is true. We're interdependent. Oh, okay. That's like Descartes, the French philosopher and French scientist. He said finally, cogito ergo sum. That means I know, therefore I exist. That means I know that I don't know where everything around me exists or not. I know that I exist because I know. And the philosophy of Western philosophy, the Socrates, the founder of Western philosophy, they talk about usually in French, know yourself. Connais-toi toi-même. This question of epistemology, that why we don't know, how we know, also addressed in this Prajnaparamita Sutra. And for example, in Diamond Sutra they said that you know the thigh bone, you see thigh bone, it's not thigh bone, and that is thigh bone. Big problem. And in some years ago, that when I was in the States, at that time the symbolic logic, you know, that using mathematical from Burton and Whitehead, that means using mathematical to materialize logic, true or false, you know. And I try to formulate this kind of reasoning into mathematical way, and I publish it, yeah, in journal of Notre Dame University, you know. So, and of course later on this theory of knowledge, that in this sutra into a big school, which such personality like Asanga, Vasubandhu, Diknaga, all these people, Dharmakirti, all these people, all the I mean the Indian Buddhism exists for almost 1,500 years. That means from the Buddha time to about 10 or 12th century. Then within that, the last 500 years, mostly devoted to 500 years or 700, devoted to this question. A lot of work written on this question. And together with this question, then it actually now here we have Vajrayana, we have Mahayana. But usually even the Tibetans themselves, they consider themselves, even last time we have our Venerable here, Tibetan Venerable here, they consider that Vajrayana belongs to Mahayana. So we should talk about a little bit about this one. How we know? So that means the four main concepts of Mahayana Buddhism. I think if we have time, then we will talk a little bit more about these four concepts and what they are related together, from Paticca Samuppada to the emptiness, from emptiness to the middle way they talk back to how we know, prajna, that means Jnana in Sanskrit, that means know, you know, because know, that means the same word, that means G and that means that like know, gnos in Greek, only thing, Jnana in Russian, something like that. So its own come the same. So that the question of prajna. So almost I only talk on this main thing, and now almost 1 hour now. So now this is 1 hour of discussion. Anybody have any question, please? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think your topic is very important, and it would be useful for our students who learn Mahayana Buddhism, right? Here we have Vajrayana, Mahayana, and Theravada. See, you can see all of them who being here. But eventually, they have to back to early Buddhism. The way we try to do now to bring them all back to early Buddhism, the way that the Buddha would like us to understand more about the teaching. Of course, in the morning session will be concept and principle of Mahayana. I do hope that in the afternoon session We always know more about how can you apply to use in your life. The way you practice. What is the way Mahayana practice to achieve enlightenment? And it should be in afternoon session, right? So many times when we have exco meeting, most Venerable Professor Dr. Prabhupada Pandit, he talk about middle way. Of course, this year the main thing we talk about middle way. So would you please explain more about this and compare together between interdependent and middle way? Because when you talk about middle way, Theravada monk we explain more about Eightfold Path, right? When we went to join middle way conference in China, when Mahayana monk from Theravada monk from Sri Lanka, Myanmar, they take the floor. They explain about the Eightfold Path all the time. But when we invite Mahayana monk to explain something, then we talk about interdependent. What is the thing? Would you please explain and mix together about this concept, please?
The first famous one, this is not new question. The question that from Nagasuna. Nagasuna is big name in Mahayana Buddhism. And of course, in Tibetan Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism. Madhyamika, his school, Madhyamika, that means middle school. Yeah, so usually they call centuries. Century school, Madhyamika. First of all, we have to know about what is emptiness. What does that will mean? So I think it's Sanskrit. Sanskrit and Pali is very important. We usually translate as emptiness. In Vietnamese and in Chinese, we translate không or kong. Very difficult to understand. For me, actually. Không. But then in tradition of Chinese translation from early down to present, they is that one. Không. We know the Sanskrit word for that means in Prajnaparamita Sutra, and then later on in Nagasuna book, they talk about that means the word Sunyata. In Pali, you have Sunyata. What does this word mean in Sanskrit or in Pali? Pali is a dialect of Sanskrit, so we talk about Sanskrit. Sun, that means the Sunyata. Sunyata is a noun, comes from Sunya. Sunya is a participle of verb sun. Sun, as in UN. What does this Sanskrit word mean? It means, this is a verb, means square to square. When you have some talk, come to your skin and put your skin, and then the skin gets swollen, swell. That means your skin like this, but then if there's some problem, then it will, or some thing, then it will swelling. So that means some sort of swollen, actually. The swollenness. And if we translate directly the meaning of Sunyata is the swollenness. And this is actually, this is very formally, I think the Buddha view, this is related to cosmology. So how our work come about. This concept is very interesting. And when we know Sanskrit work, then we see that, first of all, Buddhism says that everything is there. But it's there, sometimes there, and then it becomes swollen. I mean, just empty inside, the colon, I mean, something out and empty inside. Just like the wood by some insect, something like gold. The skin gets golden. So this world is some sort of like something there, and if something that means interaction, and then it gets swollen, it becomes manifested, something like, or it becomes not manifested. Actually, in Madhyamika Karika chapter, that means in the book of Nagarjuna, they had that sentence. Usually in Chinese or Vietnamese translation, they said that nhân duyên sở sanh pháp ngã thiệt tức thì không. That means whatever is independently originated, then we call it emptiness. This is the main tenet of Prajna Paramita. That means if you read, if you have chant the Heart Sutra, there's a sentence there. They said that form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is not different from emptiness, emptiness is not different form. That means whatever form, that means whatever independently originated, then is emptiness. Is that right? Because now at least we know that our solar system here, 5 billion years, and some more 5 billion years, then the sun used, exhausted its energy, then it collapsed, and then this solar system will somehow disappear somewhere. it becomes somewhere, it goes somewhere, but it's there, you know. So this is two, form and emptiness, continuously connecting with each other. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can write down.
You use this one? Yeah. This one? Oh, yeah, the other one. Yeah. 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 Yeah, the chun. Yeah, Sunyata. Yeah, Sunyata. Yeah. Sunyata. So the verb, this is the radical. Gives you the participle sunyata. The ta is the suffix for noun. Yeah, this it means dwelling. So because the Sanskrit, just like Pali, it belongs to Indo-European language. So this is well, you know, it's yeah, it's very, very close. Yeah, just low, just like we know about, we talk about that in Prajna. And we have a Prajna. And we know, you know. Yeah, very, very close. Yeah. And in that work of Nagarjuna, he also talk about that, whatever interdependently originated, I proclaim is emptiness. And then the second, or the first half sloka, the second half is that he talk about based upon the prajñati. Yeah. Upadaya, prajñati, upadaya. I declare its middle parts. Yeah, in that in 24th chapter, that the Madhyamika's work, Madhyamika, Karika Katra, have about 28, 29 chapter. In chapter 24, he has this sloka, almost. Yeah. But prajñapti, just like last time we talked about Vishnapti. This surface is a causative surface for the verb jñā. Nothing that causes us to know. If you learn English or you know Sanskrit or Pali, you will know that they are causative, especially Sanskrit. Pali is much simpler. but in Sanskrit, that means you are causative. That's what causes to know. A big problem. Each problem is so. That's why when we talk about Vasubandhu, the Swansang translation, a big problem, Swansang translation. Actually, he's a great man. But then, when he translates all these things, big problem for the Chinese and for Vietnamese. We have the two words for that. Now, before talking about prajñapti, I will talk about Vishnapti first. Vishnanya, of course, Vishnanya. We have this is and Vishnapti here. There are two words quite different from surface. But then in Chinese translation of those two words, Swansang translation, very interesting. He used only one word in Chinese, Shu. In Vietnamese, thức. Usually they translate duy thức, that means they are matra, Vietnamese matra, they are matra. Matra, that means duy. Wait. Yeah. So big problem for the Vietnamese and Chinese to why these two words. One is causes to know, and this is only knowing or consciousness. Usually they translate as consciousness, Vijnana. So the Vietnamese, when they read only didn't know Sanskrit myself. When I start learning Sanskrit, I feel, big problem. We completely have wrong understanding of Vasubandhu. So later on, so that's why I work on my dissertation on PhD on Vasubandhu philosophy because of that. This one causes to know. And this is what I later on I think in before talking about that middle path, because why we have to talk this one before we talk with the middle path with a that means noble path, that means we have a fold. So in Vasubandhu and actually in Yogacara, they posit, or usually in Pali and normal in Agama, we only talking about only 6 organs of consciousness. We have eye, ear, all these things up to idea, that means the consciousness. It's 6 consciousness. And in the Pali Canon, in Agama, they also talk about how we have Vijnana, how we have consciousness, we have knowledge, that we have 3 things, that we have the object, we have organ, we have own environment, and so this gives us the consciousness. That the object, the organ, and then we have consciousness. Simple, very, very simple way. That actually the very scientific way. That now the neuroscience, they rely upon this only. That they only tested the organ in the brain or in the eye and these things. And the stimuli, that they call stimuli, that the object. Yeah. And that stimulation, what is the consciousness? That is come from the stimulation of the stimuli and then the organ, our organ. Neuroscience based upon that. And this is a very big problem with meditation, Later on the meditation, how we suppress where we come from. I mean, how we, now, our brain big problem, I just read, just still reading the book that Professor Stanley brought to me day before, and I went to meeting, And then about the Dalai Lama talking with those neuroscientists, Very, very interesting, How we dream, how we sleep, how waking day, And then because of our Buddhism, we have all this contribution. Because what the aim, what the goal of the Buddha for us is that we live happily. And we live happily how we deal with our mind, But what is mind? How we feel happy. So the question of knowing. Then Vasubandhu he put, that means of a consciousness. That besides those 6, he put them the mano, usually not mano, manas, Vijnana. And then you have alaya Vijnana. So what is these two? This is, I think that later on, formally it's very difficult to understand myself. But why come up with the computer science? It's quite easy. Alaya means that memory. And Manovinana is CPU, the central processing unit. And the rest of 6 organ is just input. On those 6 organ is input. Input into these 6 organ, 6 consciousness, and put into memory, and Manovinana decide which one. We feel happy or we feel unhappy or we feel all these things said on to come from this one. CBU.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. I would like to. I have a question. It's quite a specific problem about Muramatayamika Karika. In Muramatayamika Karika, chapter 25, and on this scripture discuss about the nirvana not different from samsara, and samsara not different from nirvana. Yeah, this is the Madhyamika school tradition. Maybe okay, describe it. But I would like to know in the according to the Yogacara school, epistemology, something like this, is exists in Yogacara school or not?
Yogacara, we are talking this Yogacara school. What is this Yogacara? We are talking now. We are talking Yogacara school. Yogacara. Yesterday, it seemed that one of the Vietnamese students here, he proposed to write about 3 yana. We have Travagayana, Pratijeka, Buddha yana, and then Bodhisattva yana. And I advise him to use the Asanga work of Yogacarya Bhumi, Yogacara Bhumi Satra. In that Asanga, actually, we may meditate, mindfulness, you know. we sit down, Buddha sit under Bodhi tree, concentrate, and using his mind or something, he planned something like that, and see that discover that the inter-paticca samuppada, the interdependent origination. So the question is now, usually throughout history, Buddhist history, that means the question how we have that kind of perception. And then you ask, that means it's all right, that means because for Mahayana Buddhism, and I think the same in Theravada Buddhism, but not publicly or explicitly. Implicitly they have it, but not explicitly talking about that samsara is nirvana. That means because the Buddha come to this world and gave us his lesson is that we live happily, in the way that we live happily. That in this world. That's why this is samsara. You know. Then another author work outside of the samsara. We couldn't find nirvana outside of this one. Just like even in Pure Land. In Pure Land, you know, they worship the Amitabha Buddha in Mahayana. And of course they said there's Sakavati land far from here, on the west side of our globe. There's a Buddha called Amitabha there. And that world. They could live forever. They have a lot of that means, but live forever because it go with and they probably they have the sun. The sun they probably somehow reproductive or reproducing energy, so that their sun would not collapse just like our sun. Our sun is now some sort of like a nuclear reaction. So it is at some certain amount of time, then it run out of the resources and it will collapse, our sun. That is now in present day knowledge of our scientific knowledge of the sun, you know, and it collapse. And if we when the sun collapse, the whole solar system will collapse because I mean, if something happen, then the other thing will happen in Buddha theory. So that means if the sun collapse, then Earth will collapse accordingly, you know. So that Sukhavati land, if somebody asks me whether it exists, I said yes. Because with our limited knowledge now, formally, for example, in the Bible, they only count about 5,000 years from the time that God created Adam and Eve, you know. 2,000, that means more than, that means from the Akkadian, not from the Bible, the Old Testament, but from Akkadian Genesis. That means about 3,000, 4,000 years ago. People think that, and they count down about 5,000 years, but then later on we expand our knowledge of the world, of the cosmos, and we know that now we have about 15 billion years. But then who knows? Later on, if we have better equipment, we'll look through the sky and we see many other things we haven't know, you know. But one thing is, I think it in Buddhist view. I mean, I understand Buddhism. That means first of all we have no beginning, because we have no creating God, so no beginning. That thing just empty, and then form and form empty. That means they continuously something in this cycle. Yeah. So yeah.
Thank you. It's a very interesting and detailed, well thought out presentation. I'm very interested in the question of when we look at middle way from philosophical points of view, I think we can see different senses of the term middle way. So I'm going to describe what I see there and ask if you have comment about it. I think there is an ethical sense of the middle way, as when the Buddha decides on the great renunciation. In this context, the question is, the type of question, is sensualism of the princely palace or some kind of annihilationism, giving up everything? Is there a middle way for Buddhism between these two extremes? If you look at it in terms of being and non-being, that's an ontological question. And is there a middle way for Buddhism there to avoid ontological extremes? If you translate sat and asat, not as being and non-being, but as existence and non-existence, then you have another possibility, which is the idea that Buddhism might have a middle between annihilationism and eternalism. Your comment?
Yeah, thank you. Of course, you talk about better middle way. That's why the first sermon of Buddha in Pali Canon, I think it's because between mortification and indulgence. That show that it related to lifestyle, that human lifestyle. That the Buddha, the object of the Buddha is to bring a happy message for happy life to human beings, to humankind. So that means human, if they wish to have a happy life, they should avoid these two extremes. That means mortification is not good, of course, but then indulgence or sensualism, as you said, that means it's not right. You have a middle. But then when we talk about how we have middle way, that means in Pali Canon too, that means Rembonansari talk about that. A phone bad, that means right view, right thinking, right view on these things. And big problem, that means right view. That means the question of knowledge. In the first sermon, and Prajna Paramita respond to that. Somehow that means when you talk about that right view and right thinking, how you know right? First of all, how is right? A question of logic, not only ethical anymore, but be moved to the logic side, mathematical side. So I think even in Pali Canon that the first sermon implication is manifold, may have many ramification. Yeah, that's why this in Mahayana they have different sutra like this one. But then probably because due to the shortness, that probably because we have to remember, formally now the question of when our Tripitaka put into script, that's the question. I believe quite early. At least we know that the Sanskrit, Brahmi actually, from the 3rd century BC through the Ashokan edict, we only have script already. And of course, if here we study Sanskrit, we will know a very, very big name of linguist, that is Panini, the first book on grammar by human being, Panini. And A chapter, Asta Adhyayi. That means the grammar on Sanskrit, and very, very detailed. If you know in that one, when I was in America at that time, some linguists tried to put it into computer to generate that if you put on the thing and generate the same result or not. Yeah. So the question, when the Buddha words put into paper or cloth, actually paper later on, 2nd century Chinese invention of paper, but anyway, Vietnamese something like that. But then the on cloth, on wood, on rock, on these things. Because if in one of the Ashokan edict, Emperor Ashoka ordered that now you Sangha, Bhikkhu, you should study 5 sutra. In that the name of these 5 sutra, among which there were Rahula, something like that, is teaching of Rahula, something like that. That's how. What does that mean? That means that actually, if we just repeat chanting, somehow they have some counting or some put it. That means how many sutra they have. How many discourses of the Buddha that now, at that time, Ashokan time, they have. So, and now Ashokan, probably at that time, so many discourses, a lot of it. I think to my view, I think even Mahayana Sutra, even Prajna Paramita Sutra or Avantasaka Sutra, it exists at that time. Some views say it's late development, it's not right. I agree about that. But probably because of that, a lot of different sutra exist. And probably have some list. Otherwise, he could order that you should read only five sutra. With the name, the title of these 5 sutra. And mostly, that these 5 titles still exist in Pali Canon anyway. So, big problem. But then the question, they wonder themselves whether the title is there. And now in Pali they have the sutra with the title, whether the same or different. Big problem. No, that means the Ashokan, because what usually we say that what we have in Pali Canon now is the put in on the palm leaf in Sri Lanka, something like that, about the century before, after Jesus Christ, you know, common error. So, but then Ashokan, 300 years before, he only had that idea. So even the question of scripture. So you talk about now just like Vimon Hansa only asked me whether we but that's our main theme of the next year Vesak in Thailand is about the middle way approach to sustainable development. No. Well, so middle way. What is middle way? But middle way is actually that way in the Pali Canon. That means middle way. That means phone path. Yeah, right. Right view, right thinking, right working on these things. Yeah. But then, if we talk about right view, as I said, right view and right thinking, how we know that? What is right view? Of course, they said, normally they said, we will see that means everything is impermanent, everything. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question about the right view. Before we come to understand the right view, okay, thank you. This is not question, but I would like to exchange our idea with the professor like this. Okay, the issue of the how do we know the right view in the Buddha teaching, right? Okay, I think we should search back to the 62 view in Brahmachala Sutta first, and then when the Bodhisattva in Pali or Mahapurisa learned in the Uttaka Tapasa and Uttakada Bot and Alarada Bot like that, he learned about this. If we would like to know what is the right view in the Buddha teaching, when the Buddha is in Pali or Mahapurisa, learn in the right view, Uttaka Tapasa and Samma Tithi. it's right view. Right? Yes, Samadhi in his like that. He would like to make a different view. I would like to know and by definition of the teaching when the Buddha is speaking Buddha he have to view first in the view of the Uttakata and Adharana also, and then when he gives us the view in the first sermon of his sermon, all right, he put prefix Samma Titti, right view in his teaching like this. I think we understand. And then we analyze in the first sermon also the Samma Titti or right view point to understand the characteristic of being or non-being in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. Right this. So if we understand that we can clarify the understanding, right understanding in the Buddha teaching in the first sermon, and we can continue to Madhyamika and to the teaching in the Karachula. I think it is very clear for me. I in former time I very complicated about this, but in this time I clarify in myself. Thank you very much, sir. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. You only have listened to our very bone. Of course, the Buddha time that now in Digha Nikaya, Pramajala Sutta, or the first sutra of the Nikaya, talking about 60 or 60 something like that views, different view, philosophical view, and the view of about how to live. Now, and of course now we have some book writing about study about that sutra, who's and whose. Who, for example, there we have nothing to do with some at that Buddha time. Somebody will say that after we die, everything will disintegrate and nothing exists. Of course, materialism, what they call materialism now, and we say that somebody will say, after we die, everything that means our soul come out and exist somewhere. Eternalism or something like that. That means different view of 60 or something like that. And now already there's some scholar study about that already. And the question he talked about Samadhi, right view, actually. And later on, in Mahayana, especially Tibetan Buddhism, Buddhism loves this patriarch, this Dignaga. He wrote a book called a compendium on inference, Pramana Samuccaya. We Chinese, we don't have complete Chinese translation, but we have complete Tibetan translation of this work of Dignaga. Dignaga, and that means the Pramana Samuccaya. Pramana Samuccaya. Etc. And later, some decade ago, Harvard published English translation of this work, Harvard University Press, Pramana Samuccaya. translated by a Japanese scholar, Kitagawa. In this work, the question now, we said that DT sama right view. Samadhi, samadhi. Excuse me, samadhi. Yeah. Right view. In this work, Dignaga pose a question: how we know? We know what they call pratijaksha. Pratijaksha. Yeah. Perception. I mean, translation in perception. Pratijaksha. Aksha la I, and then pratijaksha. In Chinese, they usually translate hiền lượng. So our Buddha said about dithi, right view, we see. But then later on, all the Buddhists, they wonder how we view, how we know. We view is sama, is right view. Very important, you know. Actually, in traditional definition that we view, that we view everything is impermanent, everything is selfless. Yeah. Anicca, anatta, etc. Yeah. You wish, yeah.
Only one microphone. Hi, thank you very much for that. Before, I don't know what time do we have, but maybe before that. What time do you have? Yes, 15 minutes. Okay, thank you very much. We've been talking about the textual and very precious traditions so far. However, because of many students here from BA, MA, and PhD leveled, some has background in Mahayana, and some doesn't have background in Mahayana. So, if it's possible, I would like to request Professor to put we talk about Samadhi and middle way, the right view and the middle way, how to do that. However, in Vesak next year, we're going to talk about sustainability. And one keyword that I would like to listen is to maintain Samadhi, to maintain the right view, and how to stay in middle way along the path. That one, not the textual based, but skill based. How to pursue, if they want to pursue the path of Bodhisattva, I don't know, the path of enlightened Buddhahood, or how to maintain the right view along the path. Thank you very much.
Of course, in tradition, in the Abhidharma, they define clearly that right view is you see the thing impermanent, first of all. You see thing is selflessness. That's the second thing. I mean, if you see anything, that means you have right view. If otherwise, if you see everything permanent, that's not right. Because we get attached to it, something like attachment to it. Because you think, just like the one sutra they talk about, that mean the mother had her child dead, and then asked the Buddha, and something like that. So it's the thing is that means in Abhidharma they decide that, they define that. But then the question, throughout history, the Buddhists wonder themselves. and they propose, and of course in interaction with the other school of thought. Actually, when, for example, Dignaga, he write his book like that in response to our, at his time. Just right our time now. We study meditation in connection with neuroscience. And now, for example, we know that, for example, where is the place that causes us to sleep? When we sleep, what happens? We dreaming on these things, everything. That means, so now and someday that when we meditate, what kind of we feel in meditation? What is that? Where is it in our brain? And they are fighting. So somehow, that means Buddhism keep interact. Each generation have each kind of Buddhism. The Buddha only give us a clue. I think so. A clue. That means, first of all, you wish to have a happy life, first of all. That promise that the Buddha promises. That because he feels unsatisfied with what he lived, and now he find new way, and he drive you. For example, the independent relation like that drive you. For example, I mean everything is interconnected. Because of this one, we have to. That means in real life, that Venerable Hansa he put out. That means if we accept this one, then we would be responsible for our environment, for our community, for our fellow human being. That's why I think usually they said Buddhism in Vietnam actually. Sometimes they put it that Buddhism is something like just for individual person, just sitting meditation and take for himself. I said no. Even in history of Vietnam, that means the Buddhism, that means the Vietnamese Buddhists, they participate in any even Buddhist monk in many different fields, including political field in Vietnam. That means every social activity in any nation, in any community, the Buddhists participate in it. Because they are responsible because of that view of Paticca Samuppada. Yeah, so I think today that we have that. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Yeah, the time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for lecture of Professor Dr. Lê Manh Thát in the morning. We talk about the concept and principle of Buddhism in Mahayana sect. I think we can understand the concept and principle of Buddhism in Mahayana. We have to research back to Upanishad period and Brahmachala Sutta and the view of Aladada Bodh and Uttakatapasa also, and then we come to the first sermon of the Buddha teaching, and he illustrated to Nagarjuna to Madhyamika like that. The main concept of principle of Mahayana Buddhism is Bodhisattva and emptiness. Right. So in the afternoon session we try to apply the concept and principle of Mahayana Buddhism to daily life and society according to the main theme of celebration of Vesak next year also. So in the morning session enough time, then I invite all of you to have lunch at the cafeteria building. And afternoon session we come to this room again and we continue our lecture. We try to apply the concept to daily life and society. Okay, thank you very much for the morning session.